Hi, my name is Liz Nord, and my favorite things are documentary films.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things without using an algorithm. I'm so excited. This afternoon, I am with one of my OG going to Israel friends. I'm here today with Liz Nord. She's an executive producer who started in the news and documentaries. She makes documentaries, podcasts, multimedia, online content. Most recently, Liz worked at Sundance, and she's here today with us on Finding Favorites. Liz, how are you?
Hi, Leah Jones. I'm so excited to be here.
It's so good to be catching up with you. I was so thrilled when you sent me your email. I'm like, how have I not had Liz on yet? You had a podcast before almost anyone I knew. And yeah, I didn't ask you to be on. That's on me.
Well, yeah, so that your listeners know, I literally I requested to be on the podcast.
Yes.
I'm a fan of both Leah's and of the podcast. And I was like, I have favorite things. So,
Yeah.
So here we are.
I'm so happy. So we were doing a little catching up before I hit record and talking, just reflecting a little bit. We met in, I think, the summer of 2007 at a conference in Israel. Is that right? Did you go 2007?
No, I think I was like the year after you. It might have been, did you go another year? Yeah,
I
2008,
did.
I think. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Yeah. And at the time, your documentary, were you still working on Jericho's Echo in 2008? Or was it just,
it had
you were
been
just
out in the world, which I think is why I was invited to this conference, with like Jewish artists and Jewish, innovators, people creating Jewish things in the world. And my film Jericho's Echo was not specifically Jewish, but it was about Israeli punk rockers, and so I think it fit the bill.
Yeah. So we met then. We see each other at conferences. We see each other at conferences, weddings, funerals.
When your dad has art shows in New York.
When my dad has art shows in New York. Yes. We've got to get you guys out to Chicago.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really, really want to go to the Chicago Museum. Is it the Contemporary Art Museum, the one that's right downtown? I've been once before and I loved it so much.
The Art Institute of Chicago, which is the massive everything
that's what I'm thinking of, like near the Bean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a Museum of Contemporary Art, which is stunning. But the Art Institute of Chicago is the one. It's got everything.
I was amazed by that museum. And I live in New York, it's not like I don't have access to culture, but yeah, I'd love to come back. Also good food.
Well, we've got very good food in Chicago.
Just like maybe not this season. Like I'll come in the spring.
Yeah, no, don't come in the winter. Don't come in the winter. It's a great spring summer visit. Absolutely. No spoilers, but we're going to be talking documentaries. But I'm curious, as we head into winter, do you have any, and this will most likely be a Christmas episode, do you have any winter repeat movies, like any winter traditions that are movie related?
Oh, I love that question. I mean, winter is like prime time for movies, and obviously all the like holiday stuff comes out on the big screen, which I will say that everything, all the recommendations I'm going to make today, I know we're going to get to talk about some films. I tried to find things that are very contemporary and all available on streaming. But
amazing.
I still believe in the in-person, in-theater film going experience, especially for the blockbusters. So I usually do try to get to some of the like ones that come out between Thanksgiving and Christmas every year to like have that communal big screen, big audio like experience. So this year it was Wakanda Forever, the new Black Panther film, and I feel like the Black Panther like canon as it grows will be like an annual viewing, because it's just like they're just so like lush and beautiful. They're not really your typical comic book movies.
Yeah.
And like deep, they have like kind of a deeper meaning, but I love all that stuff. So, and I will say that the Harry Potter films always make like a good seasonal, you can watch several. They all have, almost all of them have a Christmas scene, or like a winter scene, because they go through the school year. So those are always fun. And I'm like a total Star Wars geek, so I'll always revisit the films. Have to say, not like loving all the series so much, even though I'm excited that they exist in the world.
Yeah.
But I will always go back to the films, especially the originals.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I saw Wakanda Forever a couple weeks ago. And I went and saw it in 4DX. Have you done that?
What even is that?
So 3D, right? 3 dimensions. 4D, fourth dimension. It's the fourth dimension experience. The chair is a roller coaster.
Oh, wow.
Every 4 chairs are connected, and they tilt forward and back, side to side. They vibrate. There's like a fan behind you, so if there's a breeze going through the jungle, it's a little breeze on your neck. If a bullet goes by your face, they do this like really quick puff of air past your neck, so you feel the bullet go by.
Shut up.
And I went with my friend Ronnie. We had never gone before. We really didn't look into too much what 4DX was about, and we laughed hysterically through the whole movie because our chairs.
I was just gonna say, I feel like I'd be laughing the whole time. I wouldn't even be able to like. Wow.
Don't do 4DX for a movie you want to emotionally connect to. So we felt very self-conscious being 2 white people in the middle of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, laughing in Chicago as our chairs kept like jolting us.
Oh my God. You couldn't have been the only ones. People must have been laughing.
Luckily it was like a Tuesday or a Thursday night, and it was there were only 10 of us maybe in the theater. And so we were all having our reactions. But I am very excited to see Avatar in a 4DX.
That sounds like a good move for Avatar. For people that haven't seen it, Wakanda Forever is sort of surprisingly emotional for a comic book movie, particularly because its original lead, the original Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, passed away between the first and second films, and they honor him and his sort of contribution to the films right from the beginning. I mean, people in the theater when I saw it were crying.
Right, which is the appropriate emotion, but as his sister walks through the lab in that first scene and your chair goes kaboom, kaboom, kaboom with her steps.
Oh my God.
And like your chair is like moving with her steps, and you just start laughing from then. And it's not a laughing scene.
No. I also feel like not a great situation to have like popcorn on your lap.
No, we did not. Thankfully, we did not get popcorn. There were people behind us who had like a soda, and I'm not kidding when I say I had to hold on for dear life to not get thrown out of the chairs at times.
Oh my God. I don't know if that's for me.
I wish they would make like a 45-minute 4DX experience that was like Star Wars battles.
Like made for it. That makes a lot more sense. Like how they used to make films for the IMAX, and they were so incredible in that environment. Right. And now they just show regular films on IMAX, which always feels kind of weird to me. Yeah.
So I'm not looking forward. I mean, that's how we're going to see Avatar, because otherwise I don't really care about seeing Avatar. But enough. I have to say the 3D trailer for it before Wakanda Forever, it was a stunning use of 3D.
I mean, that sounds pretty cool. And it's funny because like we're talking about documentaries today, so I'm thinking about, what does this mean for a documentary? And I think, what the documentaries that I really love are immersive, what they call immersive, where you find yourself in this other world. But I don't know that like in a doc you'd want to be like as immersed as a 4D experience. It's funny to think about. I need more people to
go so I can talk to more people about how insane I mean, there, the big fight on top of the ship in Wakanda Forever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Your chair punches you in the back. As they're like
Okay.
fighting on top, like you're feeling
No.
like fists in your back.
Yeah, I'd be like, bye-bye, unless it's like a massage. But,
It's somewhere, but it's more like a sharper image massage chair, but it's happening as punches are landing on the screen.
oh my gosh.
So I need more people to go and talk to me about this ridiculous. I don't think you need a chair that moves as a reason to go to the theater. I think you need to be with people. Like, I think the
And like
value
good
of
food
being,
and like,
yeah,
I like the comfy chairs now that lean back. Like, yeah,
yes,
there's a lot to be said for it.
yeah. I mean, I went and saw Jackass Forever in theaters twice
Wow.
just to make sure I saw it like with people.
I would like to maybe unpack that with you another time.
Yeah. What I'll say about Jackass is that it is possibly one of the greatest documentaries about male friendship ever made. How about
Now,
that?
that is not what I ever would have expected you to say. So I am, color me intrigued.
That they are, I think it's especially Jackass Forever, because at this point they've been doing it for 20 years. Everyone involved in the fourth movie, the Jackass guys, if they weren't sober, they weren't invited back. Like, Bam's not there because Bam's not sober. And they've supported each other through sobriety and through finding other businesses, through starting families. And there's, I mean, there's drinking on it because there's younger people, but there's really, like, you don't often see on film men who have been friends with each other for 20 years, working and laughing together, punching each other in the nuts, and hugging it out. Like, I felt like it was a really positive portrayal of a evolved male friendship.
That is really, really cool. I love hearing that. And like, note to self, definitely don't see that movie in 4D.
Absolutely not.
Do not need my nuts punched.
No. No. So when you come to Chicago, I'll take you to a movie at the Music Box,
Yes.
which is one of our art house amazing theaters still has an organ player. So there's organ player before the Saturday matinees.
Oh, I love that.
And I went, it's 700 people in the house.
Wow. Big house.
So I went there, sold out for RRR.
Oh, I've heard such good things about that movie. It's like on the list. It's on that winter list.
Yeah. So I think it was the most incredible, probably live theater experience I've ever had in my whole life.
Wow, because people were so into it?
People were cheering, clapping. I would say that and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I also saw in a big theater, sold out.
That was a great one to see in a theater. So wild.
Yeah.
And those guys, the Daniels, the filmmakers, are really interesting. I interviewed them once. I used to run a website called No Film School, like by filmmakers, for filmmakers. And so interviewed lots of filmmakers. And those guys the directors are like these kind of like young, goofy guys. And they've done amazing work, always kind of like pushing the envelope like they did with this film. And yeah, it's always nice when like filmmakers who seem like good people are also doing well in the world and their films are getting traction.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that one getting the nominations I think it deserved.
Also, like Michelle Yeoh, like she's just so rad. And the fact that she's now having this like big sort of second coming, even though she's been in the industry for like 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, what a badass. I love her.
Yeah, she's phenomenal. Yeah, I think our winter film traditions, well, I'm Jewish. I converted, so my family's not Jewish. So when we go to my sister's for Christmas, we watch Bad Santa.
Oh, okay.
We watch Elf, Christmas Vacation.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen them all.
Yeah.
Even when you grow up Jewish in this country, you can't avoid Christmas.
Right.
And some of them are really fun. I have a weak spot for Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas.
Yes.
Very
yeah.
sweet. I love Muppets.
Yeah. And then my sister will play she's gotten a really good Pandora station of like jazzy Christmas tunes.
Oh, can you send that to me?
I will, yes.
I do love Christmas music as well. Much of which was written by Jews. There's a documentary about it.
Oh. Okay, Liz, as promised, we're here to talk about documentaries. But I wanted, and I know you have lots of great recommendations, which I am so excited for. But my first question is, why documentaries? Like, how do you remember seeing your first documentary, or do you remember the first documentary that like really punched you in the gut and you're like, I got to know more about this?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think like most people, although documentaries are much more like prominent and available on all the streamers now, like when I was a kid, I never would have told you, oh, I want to grow up and go into documentary, because I thought documentaries were like, historical, boring things on PBS, or like nature docs, which are fun to watch, but not like, a career path for me.
Sure.
And then it sort of is like true crime. Like none of that really appealed to me, but the idea of documentary filmmaking and like filmmaking was always exciting. Or actually, the idea of filmmaking itself was exciting. That's what I originally went to undergrad for.
Okay.
I ended up leaving that major. And funny enough, like I said, later running a website called No Film School, and I'm still like, no, you don't really need film school.
Right.
But like it was a strong interest, and then I ended up becoming a graphic designer and came back to filmmaking. But part of what got me back to it was that I am one of those people that other people just talk to, like strangers all the time, tell me their stories.
I don't know. You got that vibe.
Yes. So like there was this one moment I remember pretty clearly on the bus in San Francisco where I used to live, and where I started my doc career, and I was in my like early 20s, and this woman on the bus who I did not make eye contact with, like really had no reason to talk to me, but sat next to me and started telling me in detail about her recent divorce. And I thought like, I need to do something with this. Like, this happens to me all the time.
Right.
Enough that, like, I should go some direction. I mean, clearly there's some kind of calling. I can't, even when I'm not trying, people are divulging their lives to me. So,
yeah,
I guess I could have gone, toward, like, sociology or therapy, psychiatry. But I was already in the sort of media making business, and it was like, wait a minute. You know what makes sense is to put all this together, let people talk to me. I'll just turn on a camera. And that's kind of really how I became a documentary filmmaker. And of course, once I started, learning more about the practice, I also watched tons of films and learned, oh my God, there's this whole massive world of independent documentary films that I had not had much access to previously. And it was like, oh, this is something really different. These are like emotionally resonant, relevant, kind of beautiful films that aren't like formulaic historical docs. And I don't mean to be dissing historical docs. I actually think, especially now, there's like historical docs or docs that cover historical topics that are really fascinating.
But I think
it's not like this male narrator telling you about blah, blah, blah. Like you feel like you're in history class.
I would say that women of our age, we're women in our 40s.
Wow, I didn't know you were going to be divulging our age to the entire audience. Huh. Okay.
We are plus or minus 10 years.
Yes, that's
right?
Great. Yep, women in our 30s or 40s.
As women in our 40s, we were primed for that stretch of PBS where a documentary was a Ken Burns multi-part sepia-toned documentary.
100%. That's what I'm talking about.
And that's all we knew. So absolutely, like once you learn there's more than Ken Burns, there's a whole world of more than him.
A massive world. And just, so people who might not be as familiar with the field understand kind of generally what I'm talking about is that like when I say an independent film, there's like this independent space where like an independent filmmaker, meaning they're not necessarily tied to a studio or anything like that. They've sort of raised their own money, or they've gotten financing outside of a streamer or studio so that they can kind of follow their own whims and storytelling instincts. And that's where a lot of the, films that I'm interested in, the people that I cover and work with and, promote and everything, that's the space that we live in. And to kind of go back to your other question, so, I started exploring the field. I took a couple classes in San Francisco at a place that no longer exists, but it was a wonderful organization called the Film Arts Foundation, where you could just show up and kind of like learn to use a camera without having to go to graduate school or anything. I started attending, getting involved in the local film scene in San Francisco, which was pretty robust at the time, and starting to attend the festivals. And a couple that do stand out in those early years, like in terms of experiences, like film experiences where I was like, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. One was at the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival, probably in like 2004-ish. I made my first film in 2005. There was a film called Trembling Before God, which someone who's now a good friend, Sandy Dubowski, made. And it was sort of this like pivotal doc about Orthodox Jews who are gay coming out and or like figuring out how to navigate their worlds where that wasn't as acceptable of a lifestyle or wasn't acceptable at all. And I saw the film live with an audience at the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival. And in the film itself, one of the characters' faces is blurred. You can't see them because it would be dangerous or uncomfortable. Right. Like they couldn't really be on film recognizably. Mm-hmm. So we saw the film. It was really moving. And then that character came out on stage, first time publicly, sort of showing her face and saying, I'm gay. And the audience went freaking bananas, understandably. And it was just like, it was so moving and so like, oh, like this is what a documentary can be and can do. And like, I want to be part of that.
And that it can be contemporary. It can be of things of the moment and not just 100+ years ago piecing together through archival footage.
Right. And like and that film like followed its protagonists like in their daily life. It was very present, very very, very of the moment. So that was really cool. And one other one was at South by Southwest, which became kind of like my annual pilgrimage after the first year I went, which probably was 2005-ish. And then I went like 10 or, like somewhere between 10 and 15 more years after that. But the first year I was like, this is so cool, because I went and like declared I'm a filmmaker. I like went to this film festival, film and media and everything festival, and I was like, I too am a filmmaker. And I saw the premiere of Morgan Spurlock's Super Size Me, which like, I mean, the film is like fine. It's debatable. People love it. They hate it. But the Austin, that festival happens in Austin, Texas. The crowds are super enthusiastic. They screen at this really cool movie theater called the Alamo Draft House that like serves beer and everything while you're watching the films. And again, the beauty of going to film festivals is that often the filmmaker is there. So saw the film, Morgan Spurlock shows up. Since then he's become very famous, but this was his first documentary of note. Again, the audience went so wild, and that Austin crowd is so enthusiastic. And I just thought it wasn't as much about the content of the film, but I was like, oh, like this is the rock star I want to be. I don't want to be, I've never aspired to like be in a band or whatever, but like that's the rock star I want to be. The one that like shows their film to this like, rabidly enthusiastic crowd and like gets to talk about it. And, that film will then live on and have its own sort of life and trajectory and influence in the world. That was like super exciting to me.
Wow. Those are two. Wait, now somebody's ringing my doorbell.
I felt like I heard a doorbell.
Hold on.
Okay, so you were saying those are two. We talked about Super Size Me and Trembling for God, and you said those are two really.
Yeah, and then a doorbell rang and my brain went boom. I'm just thinking about I have also gotten to meet Sandy from Trembling Before God. I think I met him at the Conversation. So we're Facebook friends, we're acquaintances, we're not friends. But certainly that piece resonated through the Jewish community continues to resonate. And then Morgan Spurlock, Super Size Me, it was such a massive global sensation.
That's one of the ones that kind of put more modern documentaries on the map.
Yeah. And showed the role, there's still a role for sometimes investigative, sometimes experiential documentary making. But I don't know. I just love that those were theater experiences for you.
Yeah. And also, what I thought you were going to say when you said, when you were commenting on these two films is that I think it also kind of like proves my point, even though, I do want to talk about more modern films, but just like those are part of a modern wave. And they're two totally different films in tone, in style, and structure. And neither of them are what one might might have historically expected when they heard the word documentary.
Yeah. So you go to South by Southwest, you stake your claim, I am a filmmaker, and then you make your first, you are your first director, the first producer. You're like, are you like on the crew of a documentary? I know I said I wasn't going to make you talk about your career the whole time, but I guess I've never gotten to ask you some of these questions.
Well,
we've known each other so long, but I've never
time.
said because I remember you like literally carrying a camera or like meeting, wasn't like Zachary Tem was he like your camera guy on one of your Jerusalem movies?
Oh, no, we never worked together.
No.
But we had people in common. And when I moved to New York, he was one of the first people that like helped me get into the New York film scene as part of a collective called the Film Shop. But I don't think that's like that relevant. But I was filming in Jerusalem, another project in Jerusalem a few years later when we might have seen each other at the ROI reunion.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But anyway, so early in my career, I was taking those classes in San Francisco. I decided instead of going to grad school, I would buy a camera and make myself into a filmmaker. I always tell people this because like there's so much about sort of just like believing and putting out there that you are doing this thing.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And, I coach creatives a lot. And at that South by Southwest, I had already started making Jericho's Echo. So I really was in the process of making a film, but I made myself a business card. We used to do that.
Yep.
And it said Liz Nord, filmmaker. And it was like as soon as I sort of put it on paper and like told people, it felt real. And it became more real, which is pretty cool. And I still need to remind myself of that. Sometimes, like 20 years into my career, I still get imposter syndrome. It happens. So,
yeah.
But when I really, really started before making it a feature documentary was doing what is called video activism. So kind of documenting stuff that is happening in the community with sort of an activist bent. And around that time was when the Iraq War was starting. And I lived in San Francisco, which is a very progressive place. And so we were doing, I was part of a group called Street Level TV. And we had a show on the cable access in San Francisco. And I would go and film like Iraq War protests and things of that nature. So I was really, I started out like pretty scrappy, like right out there, literally in the streets.
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
It was cool looking back on it. I mean, it was a moment for sure. And it wasn't, I think what's important to note is that it just wasn't so common then. Like, you don't really need video activists anymore because everybody has a camera and is documenting whatever is going on around them. Thank goodness. Like thank goodness that, for example, police brutality has now, come much more to light because people with cell phones have just exposed that. But at the time, cell phones didn't even have video cameras. It's amazing because it's not that long ago. But so it took people like us to actually go out there with cameras and make sure to be noting this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really important because everybody couldn't document. It's wild. Things have changed so much.
So much. And that's part of what's been so exciting about being in this field is that it has just changed so rapidly and documentaries have become so much more ubiquitous, and like your listeners can go see all sorts of like fascinating stuff that just wasn't really out there before if you didn't go to the art house or you weren't, like part of an educational institution that had a DVD, you know? It's amazing.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about if you're going to a film festival, which I know you often do. How are you approaching the documentary slate, assuming you're not a judge? Are you looking for topics that you like? Are you looking for filmmakers you've heard of? Like, how do you start to prioritize a festival slate?
Well, that's a great question because I've been as an audience and I've also been as press. And so I really have had to like sort of study the programs and kind of figure that out, like how to navigate all that. But when I'm not going as press, which of course most people wouldn't be going, I actually love to be surprised. So, and that's one of the amazing things, especially going to a festival like Sundance, because Sundance happens in January. And that means, you know, of course, it's the head of the year. It's also the head of the film year. And it requires, not all festivals do, of course, but Sundance requires that you're having your film's premiere. So that means that, like, if your film has played anywhere else, but at least in North America, it will not, you know, it wouldn't be eligible for Sundance. So that means as audiences, you have this real gift of going to see films that you just haven't heard much about yet. And so I usually do a combination of, you know, at this point, I know so many filmmakers, which is another just great privilege. So I'll try to see films by people I know to support them. And sometimes I just go blind, like, whatever, let's just give this a shot. That's why we're here. And that's always really fun. And then I like to kind of look outside the box. There are some films that, you know, when you go to a festival are going to have distribution, or they're already, for example, a Netflix film. So you know it's going to be on Netflix, or it's such a big name director that like it'll definitely get out there to the public. So I'll often look for the films by, say, a first-time filmmaker, or just something like slightly less obscure or like that hasn't secured distribution yet, so that I can make sure to try to see that film, you know, when I get the chance.
Right. Because it will be, you're trying to see the things that you might not have another opportunity in theater to see.
That's right. And while this whole conversation might not feel like super relevant to everyone because you can't necessarily go to film festivals, I would highly recommend that people seek out festivals in their area, because film festivals are so ubiquitous now that there's often like, you know, small local film festivals like almost everywhere. And especially because of the pandemic, a lot of the big festivals are now making some of the films available streaming. So Sundance this year, which is coming up in January, you can buy tickets to some of the premieres online, which is pretty freaking cool if you're sitting in, you know, Idaho and would never get yourself to Sundance. Actually, Idaho isn't that far from Sundance. But if you're sitting in Maine and you couldn't, you know, get yourself to Sundance or didn't have really a reason to go to Sundance, you can see some of these films, which I think is really one of the, you know, silver linings, I guess, of the pandemic. Yeah. Obviously, it rather would have not had the pandemic, but this is one of those outgrowths that is positive.
Yeah, that things have become more accessible. Some things have become more accessible.
Yes, and literally more accessible. For example, Sundance, again, never did closed captioning on the live screenings. So it cut out, you know, a whole audience that like a deaf audience, for example, that would require closed captioning. And now you can stream with closed captioning for a premiere, which is pretty special.
That is really special. Wow. Well, let's get into some of your recommendations.
Woo!
Yeah, I know you've been working on the list. Yes. So when you started thinking about, I want to tell people to watch these documentaries, how do you categorize documentaries in your, like, are you like, these are shorts, these are long, these are mid, these are like, how do you categorize it, or are you just like, this is what I'm loving right now?
That is a great question. I'm like a category person, like a kind of like a list organizing person. I guess that comes from like my producing background. So I do categorize, and I will say I'm glad you brought up shorts because I did not really include shorts on this list. Let me tell you, like, this is finding favorites, right? So it's so hard to pick my favorites. Like, you guys, I have seen like 9 billion documentaries, and so already like narrowing down longs, as I love that you say longs. I think the appropriate term is feature length, but longs is awesome. I'm gonna use it from now on. So my like list that I really came up with to talk about today are longs, but I think shorts are a really fun way to get into docs. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, I was one of those people that thought documentaries were boring. Shorts are such a great way in, and I really actually think it's kind of like the golden age of the short documentary. And people can see shorts, of course, online. And if you want things more curated, there are a lot of ways to see shorts that like someone else has already gone through. And the great thing about a short is if you don't like it, like it's going to be over soon. So there's sites, for example, New York Times OpDocs. I mean, that's so well curated. There's some that are less well known, like one called Short of the Week. It's a website, and another one called Omeletto. I'll send you the links to share with everybody. But like, there's some amazing places where you can watch really high quality documentary shorts online.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, I know that sometimes in festivals, well, I don't think this is sometimes, because it's hard to move people. Moving bodies is complicated. They'll do a shorts block. So you'll go in and you'll watch 3 to 10 shorts, and that's like a block. Yes, that's very common. And there's usually like several blocks. I mean, imagine this. And I know I keep talking about Sundance, but it's because that's like where I most recently worked for the past 4 years. But like so the shorts programmers there, they say that they watch every single submission, which is an incredible feat because there are almost 10,000 short submissions a year. So like, that the ones that get through that, that gate or whatever are like going to be pretty strong. But there's this kind of why I say it's a golden age of shorts, because there's just so many people making shorts now. The gear and the sort of technology is so much more accessible. That means there's a lot more crap out there, but it also means there's a lot more great stuff. And I'll make one other note too, because I think this episode's going to come out soon, on Christmas morning.
On Christmas. Oh my God! What
people
a
will
gift.
unwrap this on Christmas morning.
A gift.
Yes.
So it's a perfect time to mention that also every year the Oscars puts in. I don't know who actually makes it, but somebody makes on behalf of the Oscars the Oscar-nominated shorts programs in theaters across the country.
Yes.
So, and I always have so much fun watching those. And then when you watch the Oscars, you actually know what the shorts are. So I would, recommend that folks look in their local theaters for the Oscar-nominated shorts programs. And there's usually, the documentary one is its own screening. I love going to the best animated shorts nominations and the best live action shorts as well. So that's always a fun thing to do in like January, early February.
Yeah. Yes, those are for sure available in Chicago. And you don't have to be in a major city. You just have to be in a town with a theater with somebody who loves movies. Yes. Who still loves movies. Yes. And you'll get the chance to see them.
So to get back to your question.
Yes. Tell me about your longs.
Yes, my longs. So the way that I kind of thought about categories was like almost like in opposition to the categories that we talked about earlier, like the typical categories of like historical, animal, true crime. Like those are categories. But there's all these other categories. And of course, like you could split out by gender, country, whatever. That's also really interesting. But my categories are like, my categories. And I think some of them are like sort of accepted in the industry as categories. So I have a bunch of, I ended up like coming up with a bunch of categories. I'm trying to figure out like how to even like narrow down to share with everyone, because this could take all day. So I'm gonna start, and we'll see where we get. But because we had talked about Trembling Before God and Supersize Me earlier, maybe I'll bring us up to date on some more kind of contemporary docs that are like in those general categories. So like, for example, Trembling Before God, it might fall into the sort of like modern, like observational or cinema verite category, and or the character centered doc. There's a lot of overlap between the two of those, but like cinema verite is the classic documentary mode. If folks have heard of like Albert Maysles and the Maysles brothers and other really famous longtime documentarians, that's this idea of like the quote unquote fly on the wall.
Okay.
But more contemporary filmmakers have acknowledged that you're not really a fly on the wall.
Right.
That like being in the room
changes the room.
It changes the room
Yeah.
a little bit. So these are like observational documentaries, meaning like the camera's just turned on and you're watching life, but just with a little more self-awareness by the filmmakers. And
so does that mean, so they've, that there's not like a voiceover telling you?
Exactly.
You as the viewer are learning the story based on the scenes, cinema verite, that's like true cinema verite? Right?
Yeah, or
true?
like truth is what it's talking about, right? Like documentaries are supposed to expose some kind of truth.
Right.
But then that gets really muddy too, because exactly like we said, well, there's a filmmaker in the room. Is everything really true?
Right.
And I will say that part of the reason I love documentaries and why they're favorites is because so often the story behind the scenes is like just as interesting as the story in front of the camera. Of course, the audience doesn't always learn those, but like, even though these are verite, you know, they're meant to really feel true to life and you're watching this thing unfold, there are usually hundreds of hours of footage taken for a 90-minute doc.
Right.
And so it is a true story that's unfolding before your eyes, but it has been very edited to sort of create a compelling story out of, you know, all this mundane stuff that happens in life.
Right.
So one of the ones I love was nominated, Oscar nominated a couple years ago, The Truffle Hunters. This was directed by two guys, Michael Dweck and Gregory Kershaw, and it's basically about men, old dudes in Italy who are truffle hunters. They are searching for, their job is to go into the forests of Italy with their dogs. It's actually not boars or pigs that they use, with their very sweet dogs, and seek out truffles. And it's like, this is an example of like why would I ever watch? Like, that sounds so boring. But somehow, you know, the filmmakers have found these delightful characters and created these scenes that are just so beautiful to watch. And what's so amazing about docs like this is that you get this really, really up close and intimate peek into a world you just never would have known about. And it's like really funny and delightful. Like there's one guy in the film where his truffle hunting dog is really like his BFF. He lives alone with the dog. He feeds the dog at the dinner table. They sit there every night chatting away. And during the day they go out and, you know, search for these extremely rare, extremely valuable truffles. It's just this little slice of life that is so delightful. And, you know, again, these filmmakers just sort of like, just watch these guys. There's a little bit of voiceover. Sometimes it's common where there's not a narrator, but the voiceover might come from the protagonists themselves. So they might be sort of talking you through what they had done or the scene that you're watching. And you get to know them a little bit that way. But then that also crosses over to this kind of character-based, you know, documentary. So in the Truffle Hunters, like, they are characters and you know, well, characters, I would say, is not a really PC word to use anymore in the doc world. They're protagonists, they're participants.
Okay.
So they, like, yes, we're watching their lives, but it's more about like the scene and the situation and the lifestyle and their little stories. And then there are character-centered docs, which are really like focusing on one person and their sort of fascinating trajectory. So it's funny, I did not realize this when I was making the list, but I'm having like an old man moment because one of the character-centered docs that came to mind was another Oscar-nominated doc by a female Chilean filmmaker. I don't actually know how to pronounce her name. It's Maite, Maite, Alberti. She made this film called The Mole Agent. Did you hear about this one?
No.
Okay, so again, another old guy story. So this 80s, basically like this lonely old man is at home alone, and he gets this like invitation, or he sees a notice tacked up. I don't remember how he found out about it, but he basically found out that a local detective agency was looking for an elderly detective to infiltrate a nursing home to see if they could find signs of abuse. So this guy like tries out, and he gets the part, and he's like trains as a kind of, as a secret agent basically, and gets this whole new lease on life. But what happens, without giving too much away, is that even though he's there as this like investigator, he also is an old person in this old person's, residence, and everyone kind of falls in love with him, and he becomes like, and some of them literally, I don't know if you've ever been to like, an assisted living kind of place, but there's often many more women than men, just for life expectancy.
I was at my great aunt's funeral, and my Uncle Jimmy could still drive, and he was a charming man, and there were women who had been waiting since high school for him to be single again.
Oh my God, it's for real.
At the funeral with casseroles.
That is, yeah. Yeah, I, as a side note, I also was I visited my wonderful aunt before she passed away several times at one of these places, and I brought my boyfriend at the time with me once, and this older lady, like basically hit on him by pulling up the bottom of her pants and like showing off her ankle, and was like, "Hey, sailor," or whatever. I don't even know what she said, but my aunt was so horrified, and she called her a slut. It was like a whole thing. No. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that's a thing, and so at this place, this guy becomes like the most popular guy, and then the detective agency is like, don't forget to do your job. It's just like, this is one of those stranger than fiction. Like half the time you're watching and going, is this made up? Like, is this scripted? This can't be real.
Right.
But it's real. And that's the kind of doc I really love. And, again, the guy's just so charming, and it's such a funny premise, but also bittersweet. And I think that's the other thing about docs. Why I love them so much is that because they're real life, if they're done well and reflect real life, they often have that bittersweet feeling, like, because in real life there's joy and pain, there's also joy and pain in docs, which is what, I think real, like narrative films, fictional films are often trying to achieve.
Right.
So yeah, should I keep going?
Yes, you should keep going. Okay. I'm Googling these as you're talking, and they are all adorable old men.
I know, it's so funny.
Far.
I have to like, okay, so I'm going to change tack. So
it's
that
okay.
We get away from...
Look, here's the thing. If it turns out that your favorite thing are adorable old men in foreign countries with funny hobbies or with interesting hobbies, that's fine.
Like, maybe that's kind of, I am a daddy's girl, and my dad is 91, so maybe it's a thing. But I'm going to go a different direction, although there are old men in this next suggestion, but they are they're not nice old men. So yeah,
they're gonna be Nazis, aren't they?
Oh no. But I love that you went there, because that is often where I go as well. So no, funny enough, now I set this up like in such an opposite way.
You're like, oh, now they're not as bad. They're not Nazis. Well, so they're bad guys, but they're not. They're not Nazis.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But also the hilarious part about this, which you had no way of knowing, is that this category is feel good docs.
Okay.
But like, I think so. The other, like, I don't want to say misconception, because it's a real thing that so many documentaries, especially today, are like about very urgent and very dark social issues. And I think that, like, it's critical that these films exist, and they often move the needle and create real social change. And like, I'm 100% for it. And it's just not for everyone. And in fact, it's often not for me. I told you earlier, I love Star Wars and stuff. Like, I don't always want to watch like the heaviest, saddest thing in the world. And so, believe it or not, there are like a whole bunch of like feel good, inspirational documentaries. Again, could go on all day, but the one I am going to talk about, it's called The Eagle Huntress.
Okay.
And this one's on Disney. Like, this is, definitely easily accessible. Director Otto Bell. My friend Stacey Reese is the producer. And this is a really cool doc. Part of also what's cool about it, I would say, is that not all documentaries are family appropriate.
Sure.
And this one is, as I mentioned,
Okay.
it's a Disney film. So you can watch it with kids, although it's subtitled. So either you'll need to help little kids with that, or, your kids have to be old enough to read. But anyway, it is about a 13-year-old girl. Mm-hmm. Aishul Pan is her name. And she comes from, they're in Kazakhstan, in the mountains of Kazakhstan. She comes from 12 generations of eagle hunters. So this is like a big deal in the mountains. And no boys have ever, no girls have ever been trained as eagle hunters. But she's the only daughter. Her dad's a champion eagle hunter.
Yeah.
And she wants to be trained. And he says yes. And the elders, this is where the bad men come in. The elders of the community are like, no fucking way. That is not acceptable. And the dad is like, you know what? We're gonna do this. And it's this amazing story of, like, basically she becomes a total champion. Like, she follows in her father's footsteps and becomes this badass eagle huntress. And, like, again, like 13, she's like this little tiny girl, and like eagles are big and scary and have claws.
Right.
And hunting doesn't mean that they kill them. I mean, I won't get into all the like logistics, but basically she's like getting these huge eagles to come and land on her arm while she's riding a horse. I mean, this shit is crazy. It's amazing to watch. It's super heartwarming, especially for the daddy's girls out there. And it is beautifully shot. This is one of those stories where the behind the scenes is like just as interesting, which I actually didn't like plan on plugging things, but I had interviewed the filmmaker. I could send you a link to the interview on No Film School, because they had to bring like something, I don't remember, an absurd amount of gear, like 2,000 pounds worth of gear on a helicopter to the mountains of Kazakhstan to get these, incredible wintry mountain shots and action shots. It requires a special type of attention to be able to capture, again, like this, the eagle, the horse, it's not just like pointing a camera at someone for an interview. So anyway, that one is just like super fun and not necessarily expected.
And I'm clicking through the photographs on IMDb.
Oh, do you see her? Do you see Aishul Pan? Yeah.
These eagles are half her size.
This is what I'm saying. People have no idea how big a freaking eagle is.
I guess I would say like half her height, but like her torso is the size of an eagle. They could just say like, you know what? We're hunting you. They are
that's right.
Huge.
And that's why it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Of course. And, imagine their wingspan. Like, if they turn them on their side, they're probably taller than she is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a rad movie. Little girl power situation. Should I keep going?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So these are I'm just clicking through these. The photographs and the stills are just stunning.
It's so beautifully shot, and it's just such a beautiful environment. And similar to the truffle hunters, it's like most of us will never go there. We will never know what that world is. And here we get this total peek into it. And it's funny you said that about the photographs, because if I recall correctly, the reason they even made the film is because the filmmaker saw a photograph of her with the eagle and was like, what is this?
Yeah.
So the fun thing about being a documentary filmmaker is that real life is always happening. So you're constantly coming up with ideas or being fed ideas, because you just open the newspaper and there's probably several potential films in there.
Yeah.
So
oh my gosh. And she and her dad went to Telluride with their eagles.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's a picture of them in front of the Telluride Film Festival banner, like Main Street, Telluride. The two of them just with their eagles in Main Street.
Oh, that is too cool. And it makes sense because Telluride's a mountain film festival.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. Okay.
Moving on.
So, yeah,
I'm watching this one tonight, I think. I think I'm ordering Thai food, and I'm watching The Eagle Huntress.
Although if there's a Mongolian restaurant in your area, that might be more appropriate. I love that. You have to report back. And I should also just say it. I'm sure people already expect this, but like in all of these categories, I also had like several recommendations. So I'm really working hard to like just pick one.
So, and here's what I'll say. Mm-hmm. It's called Finding Favorites because it's a clever name, but it could have been called Something You Love. Because
nice.
Sometimes people really are worried about upsetting the things they didn't pick. Sometimes because they know human beings who made the things they didn't pick.
That's
and
right.
Sometimes
in my
because
case, I'm mostly talking to my filmmaker friends, so I'm like, I also loved your film, I promise.
Yes.
Yes.
So just to all the filmmakers listening today, this is Finding Favorites, Something You Love. So Liz loves you, even if she didn't name you, and you can come on my podcast in the future and rebuke her.
What a great idea. I love that. The documentary filmmakers always have lots of stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to bring up another category because we talked earlier about like the shifting of the times and how so many more people have the opportunity to document life around them and their own lives now. And that there've always been personal documentaries. Like there's always been like sort of people telling their own story or their family stories. But it's become so much more common in an area. It's become so much more common in an era when like we can constantly document ourselves and, you know, like even, you know, people our age, like our parents might have been like VHS taping our lives.
Right.
And so now someone could have had their whole life basically documented and maybe make a film about it. And of course, like some of them are really self-indulgent, but many of them are really, really good.
Yeah.
So one of them I want to talk about is coming out. Like I'm excited to talk about it because it's making its like debut right now. Like it's out there right now. And it's actually, in full transparency, I did give notes on a cut of this film, but I'm like really proud because it's by a brand new filmmaker, David Siev. And it's literally winning all the awards. Like it just won a Critics' Choice Award last week.
Ooh.
So the film, it's a weird one to say out loud, but it's called Bad Axe, not Badass, Bad Axe, A-X-E.
Okay.
Which is the name of a town in Michigan, FYI.
Oh.
So this is a very American, very timely story about this guy, David Siev's family. And they live in this rural Michigan town called Bad Axe, and they are Asian American. And they own a restaurant. And the pandemic comes, and as we all know, there was a huge rash of anti-Asian sentiment during the pandemic because, for a lot of reasons, but in part because it was, you know, we were touting this idea that it came from China, and, you know, Trump was calling it the China flu, and there was a huge uptick in abusive incidents against Asian Americans. I mean, the irony is that, you know, we're so friggin' ignorant in this country. Like, his family's not from China. They're from Cambodia.
Right.
But it didn't matter. So they were Asian American, and they were, you know, on one hand facing like all this flack from the community, and on the other hand, there were a lot of community members that had come to their restaurant for a long time and really came to support them, because it was also, regardless of their family background, just keeping a restaurant alive during the pandemic when restaurants were closing left and right, and it was hard to get supplies, and people didn't want to come eat in person. Right. You know, it just like, what an incredible story that like only this guy could have told.
Right.
Because it's, you know, his family in this very unique situation that also was like indicative of what so many other people were going through. So I love that kind of doc too, where it's a very specific story but has like a more universal or like more widely understood kind of message. So it's just like
Yeah.
really this American family story, and it's beautifully done. And again, people are really responding to it. So I'm excited also to have, known this filmmaker in his early stages and see kind of like where he's going to go with his career. So anyway, it's out in theaters now.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
January 5th.
Is that it? January 5th it's going to be
well,
streaming?
January 5th, it will be at the Gorton Center in Lake Forest, Illinois at 7 p.m.
Nice.
So I searched it, and Google always wants to help you see something. So it immediately was like showtimes near Chicago.
Oh, how great.
So it is showing. So people search it on Fandango and see if you can find it when it's coming to your town.
For sure. I mean, that's exciting too, because not all docs even get theatrical distribution. And, if you can't see it or if it's not in your town, this one, again, because of all the acclaim and momentum it has, will definitely be coming out on streaming.
Yeah.
So that's that. And you know what I realized? It's funny because obviously I'm a female filmmaker. I am very active in movements to raise up female and BIPOC filmmakers. And I even am like a really early kind of founding member of a group called Film Fatales, which is for female directors. And I have not talked about one female director yet. It's like I said, it's Guy Day for me. But there are so many amazing female docs, female fronted docs out there. Oh, I did say my friend Stacy produced Eagle Huntress, but she's not the director. So I will talk about one of my favorite filmmakers in general, but like her stuff is out there. So this is for people that like something a little more unusual.
Okay.
This category is sort of an up and coming one. It's becoming much more like prevalent in the field, and it's called hybrid. That can mean a lot of different things, but it's essentially like it comes from the idea of being a hybrid between a fictional and a documentary film. So and what it is, I told you earlier that I like to check out the films that are kind of like playing with form, that are doing something a little different, that are maybe pushing the envelope. And these are documentaries that are pushing the envelope, where it's asking the question like, what is real, what is documentary? Often they're kind of poetic. So this filmmaker, she's an Israeli-American filmmaker named Alma Har'el. She also directs fiction work, which I think, informs some of this. But basically, she's made a couple films that are like in this world of this hybrid world, worth mentioning, and that are available are Bombay Beach and Love True. And apparently, by the way, it was so she directed the film Honeyland, not Honeyland. Oh my gosh,
Honey Boy.
Honey Boy. No, Honeyland is another film on my list. That's funny. But anyway, Honey Boy is a fictional account, but like it's like hybrid in the other way. It's a fiction film, but it comes from the true story of like Shia LaBeouf's life. And Shia LaBeouf, contacted her to work together after seeing Bombay Beach. He was like, wow, this is so fascinating. So her first feature doc is called Bombay Beach. A more recent one is called Love True. And both of them are worth mentioning because basically they're just like super creative in that they are documentaries. They're kind of like the verite style. You're watching people's lives unfold, but they break out into these constructed formats in the middle of the film when you're like totally not expecting it. Like, what the hell is going on? Which I kind of like. So like in Bombay Beach, for example, there are dance numbers. So it's not a film about dance, and it's not a film about dancers. It's like if you've heard of the place Bombay Beach, it's like this super poor community in Southern California that is like on the shores of the Salton Sea, which is a man-made sea in the middle of the desert. Actually, I think it's in Colorado or California. Anyway, it's a man-made sea that used to be this vacation destination, and now I have to say I love the description on IMDb. I wouldn't normally just read you the description, but the IMDb description says that the Salton Sea used to be a beautiful destination vacation for the privileged and is now a pool of dead fish. So anyway, she's just documenting the lives of these people that, some people that live in this wild place. But in the middle of scenes of just like of their lives, there's like these breakout dance numbers that she worked on them with. She worked with them on, and I guess it was sort of like a way to like express their internal dialogue and their thoughts and feelings.
Right.
So like it's still documentary in that like you're still getting to know these real people and their real lives, but she's like expressing who they are in a way that's constructed. And this sounds maybe a little bit esoteric, but I just find it so interesting. And the way she does it is like really, really cool. And in Love True, it's kind of similar. It's a movie about love. And she's following 3 love stories, and that love is very broadly defined. It's not necessarily a typical love story, but in that one, she used some sort of like devised theater, kind of like psychiatry techniques, and had the characters like kind of theatrically recreate some of their own stories.
Yeah.
So again, in the middle of what feels like a typical cinema verite documentary, it breaks out into these scenes where you're like, what the hell? Like you're kind of watching someone's dream happening on screen, starring them. Yeah, it's some wild stuff, and she's just interesting. So I recommend checking her work out.
Also, her website is wild.
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I know she does a lot of weed.
It's a lot of like multi-layered. It's got a real MySpace vibe.
Oh, fun.
With
MySpace. Wow.
Yeah. And also she could play Tori Amos in a movie.
Yeah, side note, she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, like amazing skin. It's anyway.
Yeah.
Can I do like 2 more?
2 more to bring us home.
Okay. Well,
no.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because I'm thinking these are all kind of like serious. I don't want to end on a total serious note, but I do want to bring up one more, probably the most serious one that I have, and then we'll end with fun. How's that?
Okay, great.
Okay, so the other, I think, very like typical, oh, this is a documentary, is a biopic. Like it's a story about someone's life. And we've had these in pop culture too forever. Like you think of like Behind the Music or something. Like there've been cool ones. I think the biopic has gotten much more creative in recent years, and one that I really just loved and was so like gutting. Just it's a hard watch. It's not a light watch, and it's not children appropriate. But it's called I Am Not Your Negro. And it's a 2016 documentary, actually made by a Haitian filmmaker, Raoul Peck. And what's so interesting about this is the subject is James Baldwin. If people don't know him, he's like a very prolific Black American writer and kind of civil rights activist. And before he died, he had like an unfinished manuscript about like several other civil rights leaders who he was like in the social circles with, like Medgar and Malcolm X and MLK, these like really pivotal figures in civil rights in this country. And he never finished the book. So this filmmaker, I don't exactly know how he came upon the manuscript, but he essentially like finished the book for James Baldwin by creating this film. Like this film is like the film version realization from another creative of this other creative's work, which in itself is like such an interesting concept. And he did this with just like incredible archival footage, but also really beautiful graphics and this amazing kind of narration voiceover by Samuel L. Jackson. And it's just like really lyrical, and it's such an unusual, like it's such a unique film that it's sort of hard to describe, but it also is going through some of, America's most challenging social moments and then like resonates so sharply still today, like the issues that are covered, that it's just like, it feels so relevant, but it's also just an incredible watch. So
I remember when it came out, but I don't think I knew, like, I knew it was about James Baldwin. But I didn't hear any of that backstory about it.
yeah.
Like,
So
I guess I just thought it was a
straight up biopic, right?
straight up biopic, yeah.
Right. Which
Yeah.
is why I am bringing it up.
Yeah.
And also, if people just want like fun, like more fun and more standard, but like holiday watch type biopics, I really love the partnership. Also, these are friends, but Julie Cohen and Betsy West, they have like created this sort of like whole canon of like documentaries about badass women. So probably a lot of people have heard of RBG, the film RBG that you know, got such a big a lot of attention, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I saw that one in the theaters, where we like were in the last row at the top of the theater because it was sold out.
Oh my gosh, did you love it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. That's when, I mean, she was still alive when that came out. It was, right?
Yeah, I saw the premiere at Sundance and she came.
Ooh, wow.
It was awesome. But anyway, they've also made these other films about like Julia Childs and civil rights activist Pauli Murray, and the most recent one is about Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman who got shot. And they're just like, those are, well, that one's pretty serious, but like these are, they have this like kind of like women biopic genre going, and they're really good at it. So those are, just another sort of recommend on the completely opposite side of the spectrum. To wrap up on a fun note, I have to go full circle because my first doc, Jericho's Echo, was a music documentary, like I said, about the punk scene in Tel Aviv. And music docs are really like my first love. And I didn't really talk too much about them because that could have been like a subset of Finding Favorites. Like we could have done the whole episode on music docs. So I will just say, everybody knows what a music documentary is. There's tons out there. And they're so fun. And my bone to pick with music documentaries, the ones I don't like, are where the documentary doesn't meet the excitement of the music. Like if the music and the movement it's part of is more interesting than the documentary itself, there's a fail. And there's a lot of those, but there are also so many good ones. One of the most recent that has gotten tons of attention, it's on Hulu, is Summer of Soul. Do you know that one?
No.
So this is cool. This is the first feature directed by Questlove, the musician from The Roots. Yeah. And now he's like Mr. Filmmaker. Like he's got several projects in the works apparently. But this is fascinating because it is about the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969, which was like a series of concerts that happened in Harlem, in New York City, where I live, in 69, like around the same exact time Woodstock was going on. And it's kind of fascinating because we haven't really heard about this. Right. And yet it was a festival where like some of the most influential musicians of our time played, but they were Black. And it never got this sort of traction, even though, of course, Jimi Hendrix and others played at Woodstock, but this was this sort of like homegrown festival that was just incredible. And as I keep mentioning,
over the course of 6 weeks, like it was the whole summer.
Yeah, it was like this ongoing concert series of concerts, and like all over the map in terms of the types of music that were played. But this is one of those, another kind of like behind the scenes is so interesting. Essentially, like somebody filmed it for public television. Nothing ever really came of it. The boxes sat in someone's basement. Somebody was cleaning up, like the typical story. They found these rolls of film and were like, hey, what's this? And basically, like, essentially, ultimately, Questlove was like handed this material, like, I bet you'll be interested in this. And he made this just film where you're like, holy shit, like this was this pivotal cultural moment that we're finding out about now, 50 years later. And some of the footage is just so amazing. And like these artists that are so ubiquitous now, you're seeing them in their really, really young days. And like you're seeing huge crowds, huge Black crowds in Harlem, just like loving it, loving the summer. We so often see about the social unrest of that time. So it's really beautiful to see just like people just loving it and having a great time, and it doesn't feel, any kind of way other than like, this is beautiful and musical and soulful and fun. So that one is that's a fun watch, and an eye-opening watch as well. And then there's just, there's a million music documentaries. So I recommend just like kind of poking into that genre for people. It's another one of where, like, if you haven't watched a lot of documentaries, it's like a good entry point. It's like an accessible, an accessible kind of subgenre.
You've given us such a good list of things to watch on winter break.
I'm so excited about that. And I'm so excited that we did this, and that and you've given me so much time to chat about favorites. And
I love it.
You're one of my favorites, so it all works out well.
I can't wait till I get to see you again. I got to get to New York next year.
One of us will get to the other place soon. Or like maybe we should go meet in the Bahamas. I don't know.
Also that. Yeah. Also the Bahamas.
Anyway, so I will be happy to send you some links to these films, and if the world demands it, if your crowd wants more recommendations, I can also send a list for the site.
Amazing. Where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, that's fun. I'm at liznord.com. That's probably the easiest way. I'm really into photography, street photography, and casual photography. It's a way to sort of keep up my creative practice without having to make a film that takes 5 years. So Instagram's a good place to find me, and I'm just at Liz Film.
But thank you so much. This has been really a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas to all the listeners.
Yes.
Who are listening on Christmas. I don't know.
It's Merry Christmas. It's Merry last night of Hag. I think it's the last night of Hanukkah.
Yeah, it might be the night before, but either way, yes. May your holiday season be merry and bright, whatever you celebrate, or even if you don't celebrate anything.
This real perfect overlap of Christmas and Hanukkah this year ruined my Hanukkah party.
Oh.
Which is traditionally the Saturday night of Hanukkah.
But that's
I have a
Christmas
big party.
Eve.
It's Christmas Eve.
Oh, darn.
And I will be with my family.
Right.
So.
Oh,
and I don't.
I love
we'll see if my sister allows me to cook latkes in her kitchen. I don't know.
They do stink up the place, but they're so delicious. They
really do.
Yeah, I'm gonna try cheddar latkes this year just to make latkes more fattening.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.